thank you for watching my channel today. Your true shelf. My name's Sarah, and today this is my first ever booktube tag, so it's very exciting. So thank you for the tag. And the tag was to talk about 10 or more books which helped me through difficult times. So this felt like it was a really good time to talk about this because last week I really struggled, and I'd had a week off the week before, and then last week I was back to work, and going back to work just felt really difficult. I felt like I didn't have any time. I was really overwhelmed with the amount of stuff I had to do, and I just felt like everything was getting on top of me. There was so much pressure, and I really didn't have a very easy week at all. Thankfully this week has been a lot better, and I think part of the reason to that is that I have turned to some of the books which I have on my TBR, which I knew would help me. And I've also been listening to some podcasts which I knew would help me. And I did do, one of my first videos was a wellness and wellbeing TBR, so some of the books are on there. So I'm going to focus today on books that I have read, so that I know that they are definitely ones that have helped me through difficult times. So there's quite a few, so I will kick off now. And if there's any books that you want to hear about in more depth, then just leave me a comment below, and I can always do a video about them in more depth if enough people want me to. The first book is one of my favourite books of all time in the whole world, and that is this beautiful book, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. So Eckhart Tolle is fairly well known, so I will introduce him in case people don't know who he is. He is a teacher, a spiritual teacher. He has written a book called A New Earth, and he's also written a book called The Power of Now. And his books are based around mindfulness, and this book I came across because Oprah did a series with Eckhart where she spent an hour and a half talking with him about each chapter. So there's 10 episodes which are an hour and a half, which you can get online, and they literally changed my view of the world. They changed how I dealt with stuff. They really break down all the chapters and make them really easy to understand and work through examples. And this book, it was just one of the most precious books I own. I love it. I refer back to it, and I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in mindfulness or meditation, especially alongside the discussion with Oprah, because it really helps it become more accessible. The second book I have on my list is one that I haven't read for a number of years. I read this when I was a student, so a good 10-12 years ago. So this is Entering the Circle by Olga Karatiti. This is a non-fiction book again. Virtually all of the books, I think apart from one, are non-fiction on this list. This is her first book. She is a Russian psychiatrist, and she goes through a trek in the mountains, and she has a guide who is a Siberian shaman. And the shaman kind of takes her on as an apprentice and teaches her like shamanistic ways from Siberian tradition, and then she goes and takes that into her psychiatry practice. So it could sound a bit bonkers, I appreciate that. My mum bought me a copy. We both read it, and we both were like wowed by it at the time. I think this was quite hard to get hold of, but she got me my own copy and wrote me a lovely little message inside. And so I haven't read this for a long time. I'd really like to reread it actually, just to see how I feel about it now. But this book helped me through times when I was struggling when I was a student, and I was struggling with how I viewed medicine, as I've talked about in previous videos. So this was one that helped me in that time. The next book that I read is a book called Women Who Run With the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And this is quite a big book that I read approximately 2 years ago, I would say. And if I read the back, it's probably easier than me trying to describe it. So Clarissa Pinkola Estes reveals how within every woman there lives a wild woman, filled with passionate creativity and ageless knowing, but repressed for centuries by a value system that trivializes emotional truth, intuitive wisdom, and instinctual self-confidence. Dr. Estes' enriching bestseller shows how, through the interpretation of story and her psychological commentary, we can reclaim and rejoice in our true feminine power, how we can awaken within the depths of our souls one who is both magic and medicine. So it talks about a lot about archetypes, it talks a lot about women in stories, it talks about what, you know, our inner wildness, our inner goddess, and this is something that I've been really fascinated by since I became a mum. And one of my tattoos, which I don't know how to hold it up without it being upside down. I tried to just show it on the screen, it didn't work. I will put a picture of one of my tattoos, which is it's kind of inspired by this book. It's sort of wolves and the moon, and it was inspired by this book and the inner wild woman that we all have. So this is a book which helped me with my feelings that I had like this since motherhood. So the next book is -9 to 1 by Jules Oliver, Jamie Oliver's wife. So this is a book I bought long before I had any children. I saw it in Borders, which shows how long ago it was, because Borders went a long time ago. And I wanted to save it for when I'd had a baby. So I saved it on my shelf for quite a long time, and then I read it when my daughter Faye was a baby. And I haven't reread it since, but when you've just had a baby, you feel like you're really fumbling around in the dark. You don't really know what you're doing. And this book was a really nice guide for that time for me. Jules is really, she's really good at writing. She is funny. It's easy to read, but she does also give advice as well as sort of anecdotes and stuff. So this was a really nice book. I haven't, like I said, I haven't reread it since to see how I feel about it now that I've got 2 children and that I'm more an experienced mum, but it really helped me at the time. Next we have Elizabeth Gilbert's memoir of Eat, Pray, Love. So I'm sure everybody's heard of this book, and it had a film adaptation with Julia Roberts as Elizabeth Gilbert. It's about how she splits up with her husband at the beginning and gets divorced, and then she goes on this quest where she goes to Italy and she eats and enjoys the beautiful Italian way of life and the Italian food, and then she goes to an ashram in India where she prays and she goes on a retreat and learns to be still, and then she goes to Bali and she falls in love. So this book, I again read this a number of years ago. I probably will reread it at some point, but it's about how difficult times can basically help us with our growth if we use them as such. So this is a really good one for anyone who's going through difficult times. The next one is a really small book which I came across probably when I was a teenager. That is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. This is a collection of sort of mini essays, or I don't know how to really describe it, little collections of writings on different topics which are beautiful. This is the 75th anniversary edition, which my mum got me, and again wrote me a lovely message inside. My favourite one is one about pain, which is one that I've gone back to a lot of times. If I just quickly find it. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning of the writing, because I just love this bit. A woman spoke, saying, "Tell us of pain." And he said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields, and you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief." I just love that. I've read that so many times that I probably could have said it off by heart. This is such a gorgeous book. It's got so much wisdom in it, and you don't need to sit and read it from cover to cover. You can just pick a mini essay or a mini poem on whichever thing you're struggling with, and it helps me anyway. So next I have Touching the Wild by Joe Hutto. This is a gorgeous book which has got lots of pictures in. So just find, so you can see there's quite a lot of really lovely pictures in here. And Joe Hutto is, I came across him because one time my mum messaged me and she said, "They've just seen this documentary on Natural World. It's brilliant. You have to watch it. It's about a man who raises some turkeys." And I was thinking, okay. And he basically, so the turkey documentary was amazing. He basically has some wild turkeys in the States, and he raises them. They think he's their mother because they see him first when they hatch. and he raises them and he makes a documentary about them, and it's just one of the most amazing documentaries I've ever seen. I've tried to get it online loads of times since and I can't get it, but it was brilliant. So then I wanted to know about him, and he's written some other nature books, and Touching the Wild is one of the ones that he's written, and this is about where he lives amongst a herd of deer in America, and where he lives in Wyoming, and he gets to know the deers, and he gets to he looks after them, and it's also about some really sad things like when they're hunted, and I learned loads about the species. I learned loads about animal behaviour. I learned loads about the interaction between, between humans and animals, and that means a lot to me because I'm vegan. I love animals, and this helped me because I am quite obsessed with nature and going out into nature, and this really came to me in a time when I was really exploring that, and it really helped me make sure I made enough time to go outside into nature. So this is a gorgeous book. So next up is Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Anyone who hasn't discovered Brene Brown, you are missing out. She is amazing. She did a TED talk about vulnerability, which is got millions of views now. I'd recommend starting with that because she talks about the premise of her work. Probably again best if I read from the back rather than sort of mess up trying to explain this book. So every time we're introduced to someone new, try to be creative or start a difficult conversation, we take a risk. We feel uncertain and exposed. We feel vulnerable. Most of us try to fight these feelings. We strive to appear perfect. But in a powerful new vision, Dr. Brene Brown challenges everything we think we know about vulnerability and dispels the widely accepted myth that it's a weakness. She argues that vulnerability is in fact a strength, and when we shut ourselves off from revealing our true selves, we grow distance from the things that bring purpose and meaning to our lives. Daring Greatly is a culmination of 12 years of groundbreaking social research across the home, relationships, work and parenting. It's an invitation to be courageous, to show up and let ourselves be seen even when there are no guarantees. This is vulnerability. This is Daring Greatly. I'd really recommend this book. It's wonderful, and it gave me courage, and it made me realise that being vulnerable is a good thing, not a bad thing, and it's brilliant. So the next book is The Wisdom of Sundays by Oprah Winfrey. This is a book which, it might sound a bit strange when I say this, I haven't read this book yet. However, this book is based on the conversations from Super Source Sunday, which I have listened to hundreds of them, and they are my favourite thing to listen to. They always help me. They always give me something to think on. They always give me something that I learn. They are absolutely amazing. She is my absolute heroine of all time. I love her. And this is a book which takes the best parts of the Super Soul conversations, and it's beautifully done. It's cloth bound. It's got gorgeous pictures and quotes, and like I say, I will get to it very soon, but the reason I haven't yet is obviously just because I've got so many books. I can't wait to read it, and I know that it's going to be one of the books that helps me through difficult times, because the audio of it has really helped me through difficult times so many times since literally I was age 14. So thank you for this book, and this will help anybody, I'm sure. My one and only fiction book on the list is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This is really hard to say. Probably my favourite fiction book of all time. It would be very tough for me to say that for definite, but as much as I can say that, I think this is my favourite book of all time. I've reread it loads and I absolutely love it. It's about Liesel Memminger, who is a little girl in Nazi-occupied Germany, and her mum has been taken by the Nazis. Her little brother has died, and she has to come and live with a new family who are Hans and Rosa Huberman, and it's about her relationship with Hans and Rosa, about the friend she forms, and it's narrated by the devil. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's narrated by Death, which is a funny concept, and it's about books. Liesel can't read initially, but she loves books, and she steals a book when the Nazis are burning books, and then it's about her quest to find more books, and the characters you absolutely fall in love with. Like, I can remember all the characters' names, I can remember all the streets, I can remember loads of more detail. Like, even though I haven't reread this for a couple of years now, I can still remember way more detail than I can about books that I've read really recently, because I just adore it so much. And whenever I need some comfort, sometimes I had it on audio CD first, CD, so it shows how long I've had it. And sometimes I just put one of the CDs on, wherever it starts from, it doesn't matter, because I know the story and I just love it, and it's so comforting. So anyone who hasn't read this, I would massively recommend it. It's just brilliant. Okay, so this is my last physical book, and then I have a couple of audio books to share. This book is probably my most treasured book of all time. I know I said that about the Eckhart Tolle book. This book just probably pipped it to the post as my most treasured book ever. That is The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukov. You can see here all of the bits that I've marked, which are really, really special to me. I don't really know. Okay, probably the best again if I read the back, because otherwise I'm going to mess it up trying to explain it. In The Seat of the Soul, Gary Zukov guides us on a journey of exploration into worlds that reach beyond our five senses, opening our eyes to the existence of intangible realities and taking us beyond the external world deep into the realm of the soul. Brilliantly analysing the fascinating complexities of human experience, this stimulating book offers us a unique opportunity to understand ourselves at the deepest level, with the hope of becoming masters of our own spiritual evolution. So I came across Gary Zukov in the 90s from Oprah. He was on her show a lot in the 90s, and I have been a huge student of his ever since. And I've got other books of his, and can't recommend this highly enough. It is quite it can be quite difficult in places if you're not used to reading this kind of book, so it might be better to start with the Eckhart Tolle book if you're looking for stuff like this, or to just have a look on YouTube at some of the videos he's done with Oprah and see if it's your kind of thing. But this is like one of the books that has just made such an impact on my life that I can't even express it into words, so I love this book. So that's all the physical books I have. There was three books that I'd listened to on audio that I also wanted to give a quick mention to. Two of them are by Cheryl Strayed. The first one is Wild by Cheryl Strayed, which is a memoir. Cheryl Strayed is a writer, and she wrote about this trip when she walked along the Pacific Crest Trail when she was in her early 20s, and she walked it by herself. She had no training to walk it. She hadn't prepared at all. And it's about her journey through the wilderness, through the mountains, the people she meets along the way, the lessons that she learns. She's grieving for the death of her mum, which is a big part of the book, and which prompts her to go on the journey in the first place. But her insights and her story and her writing are just wonderful, and is something which, again, for anyone who knows the power of nature and the power of sort of introspection about things, it was just a really great book, and I'd really recommend it. The next one was also by Cheryl Strayed. It's called Tiny Beautiful Things. So she used to, not sure if she still does, she used to write an advice column called Dear Sugar, where people would write in, and then she would obviously write back, like an agony aunt kind of column, but much better than the kind of things we're used to. This is a collection of the letters and replies that she's written, obviously the best ones, and she writes about a huge diversity of things, a huge diversity of people's problems, and she gives amazing advice, really amazing. And so this is a really great book. It's something you wouldn't have to read the whole thing necessarily in one go. I love listening to it on audio because I used to listen to it on my journeys to and from work, so I'd hear a few letters on the way there, a few letters on the way back, and I'm sure anyone could take something from her replies because they're brilliant. And the final book, I know I've chosen quite a lot of books here, the final one is called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, who was the author of Eat, Pray, Love. She has written a book about creativity and about the magic of creativity, and how about dedicate. It's quite a short audio. I think it was about 5 hours or 6 hours, and it was about how creative projects come to us, and how we need to interact with them, otherwise they'll disappear, and about how we should make more time for creativity, how we prioritise it, how we make it fun. It was really good. I'm probably not doing it justice at all, but I really enjoyed it, and it really helped me as a creative person who often can shove my creativity to one side sometimes because I'm pushed for time with work and being a mummy and everything. So that was a really great book. I feel like I've done a lot of talking. I didn't realise the video was going to be this long. As I say, if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts of these books, let me know. If you're excited to read any of them, let me know. And if there's any ones which you thought, oh, I'd really like to hear a little bit more about that, then I'd be happy to do a more in-depth video about any of them if anybody has any interest in doing that. So I hope that some of these books might help you guys through difficult times. I have lots of these kind of books on my TBR as well, so I'm sure I'll be doing wrap-ups which include the ones that I have yet to read. And I hope you're all having a good week, and I will speak to you soon. Bye!